Hey, it's Melissa from Kiwi Banana here, and today I want to talk about how you can make sure that you are eating, continually eating, or if you're just transitioning, I guess, over to a plant-based diet, or you're looking to get into a vegan lifestyle, or you already are on that way and you want to, make sure that what you're eating is nutritious and also is not outside your budget. Now, I've been eating plant-based food, and I've been, I guess you could say, living a vegan lifestyle for over 5 years. So I feel like I've gotten to know a few tips and tricks, especially when it comes to food. I've always sort of been interested in whole foods, and I have, I guess you could say, always being reasonably savvy when it comes to making sure that I'm eating good food, but without overextending my budget too much. And I know, I guess, what someone defines as good food is going to differ from person to person. So, if you want to be a raw, organic, plant-based vegan foodist, then of course this is probably not going to be enough of what you're looking for in the video. But if you're happy to incorporate a bit of cooked and raw food, and you also are not too strict on the sense of conventional and organic, but if you can mix a bit of both in that, that is great. Obviously eating more organic food could be better, and obviously eating local and less processed is great, and also being able to eat and get food that doesn't have any packaging in it is also another bonus, which I know is sometimes a bit of a budget barrier. There can be a budget barrier sometimes with that. But anyway, let's just get straight into it. So first I'm just going to mention a few ways that you could get your food that may be outside this sort of what would be considered a normal way that people get their food these days, especially living in urban environments. So number one I want to talk about is community gardens, or finding a way that you can grow some of your own food. So obviously this is going to depend on where you are, but where I am, I guess you could say I'm reasonably privileged in the sense that there's a number of community gardens and community like orchards around where I live, especially within, I'd say, about 2 kilometre radius of where I am. So if you don't know anything about those, look them up and see if there's one in your area. If you've got a balcony, or maybe you have a backyard, then obviously there's an opportunity for you to grow a little bit of food there. It doesn't have to be a lot. And of course a lot is a very subjective term, but even if you just have a porch or a patio, or whatever you like to call it, if you can get hold of a couple of pots, maybe you could grow a few herbs and maybe a few plants that you would be able to eat from. Also gives another aspect of to see what it's like to grow your own food, and I guess some people could say that it helps with connecting up with nature a little bit more. Okay, the next one I want to talk about is, excuse a little bit of noise, there's a little bit of construction going on at the moment. Another one I want to talk about is dumpster diving. Now I know this is a reasonably controversial, or can be controversial, kind of topic, and I don't want to discuss anything around legalities or health and safety around that, but that could potentially be an option for you. I would recommend you do your own research as to whether that's something you are happy to do, and I am actually going to do a dumpster diving video in the future, talking a bit more about that. Now another one is foraging, and you may live in a not so urban area where you can sort of forage around for food. You may still live in a city, but for me, I live in a place like Brisbane, Queensland. It's a rather tropical climate, and there's often different fruits just growing in different places. So sometimes they're public places, maybe it's a tree hanging over onto the footpath, maybe from someone's property. If you know them, maybe you could pop in and say, hey look, I really would love a few more mangoes I see that you've got there, like you don't seem to be eating more, can I have some? Or if they're on the ground, it's up to you whether you want to pick them up. Also, there's actually a number of what we might consider weeds that you can eat. I would probably recommend you do a bit of research around actually identifying what is safe and not safe to eat. Dandelion is a perfect example of that. So that can be a good way to sneak in a few extra nutrients. Herbs, weeds are often, they actually have some really good nutritional properties. Just as I said, just make sure that you check and you know what it is that you're doing. You don't want to be consuming something that turns out to be rather toxic and not very good for you at all. Also, another one is if you want to look at food co-ops. Now, food co-ops can look different in lots of different places. I feel rather privileged in that I am actually involved in one, and that's it's about 1.5 kilometres away from my house. It's not very far for me to walk. And I know there's a number of other food co-ops within a 5 kilometre radius of where I live as well. So that could potentially be an option for you to look into. The one I go to, they have a little bit of organic, and most of the other food is what I guess you can consider spray-free. It's that middle market of, it's not pretty enough to be sold as conventional food, but they haven't gone as far as paying for all the certification to get the food to be certified as organic. So it's a little bit of that middle market. Also means I get to also contribute back towards local growers. So the one that I'm in, they tend to try and buy things within a 100 kilometre radius is usually the preference. We might go a little bit more for certain goods that there might be a number of people calling for that we have. So yeah, I guess those are just sort of some different areas that you may want to look at getting food, other than just your normal sort of shopping experience that you may have if you just pop into a big supermarket. Now, another tip. This one may seem quite obvious, but obviously do try and buy seasonal. If it is winter where you are and you're trying to buy fresh blueberries, obviously that's probably got to travel a wee while to get to where you are, unless you're in a super tropical climate or something rather, and it's not always going to be the cheapest. So try and buy seasonally when you can. I mean, the human body, I don't know if you could say it is now, but it definitely was used to eating seasonally, and we wouldn't necessarily always eat the same food throughout the whole year. We often would change with the seasons. But that's a topic probably for another day. Now, another one is to buy in bulk things like your rice, beans, lentils, nuts, seeds. Nuts and seeds can be a little bit funny because you don't want to keep them too long because they do have a reasonably short shelf life. But there are ways that you can help store them and make sure that they don't go off so quickly. Also, so things like oats and pasta and root vegetables, things like potatoes and sweet potato, they can keep a reasonably long time as long as you are storing them appropriately. So when I lived in New Zealand and I bought potatoes, I generally would not put them in the fridge. But now living in Australia and in a place like Brisbane, I keep my potatoes in the fridge. So you really have to just look at how you can store those foods. Now, obviously, when you buy beans and lentils, when you buy them dried, they are usually cheaper than when you buy them in a tin. And also there's added bonus of the fact that it's not kept in a tin, so potential metals or whatever are not as likely to get into your food. Plus there's it can be less packaging, and there's not extra like sodium and other things that they may add in it to help preserve those goods to be wet. So there's also the aspect obviously of the cooking time and the resources for that. So I would recommend soaking them, depending on what they are, anywhere between 6 to 24 hours before you cook them. A lot of people recommend a high pressure cooker. If that's not something you're able to access, then maybe boiling them, depending on what they are, anywhere between sort of 20 to 50 minutes, maybe up to an hour, as long as you've soaked them prior. That should be sufficient time to make them soft enough to consume. There's also a bit of rinsing and stuff that I like to do when I eat mine. So some people say to do that, some people don't. It's really up to you. You probably want to do your own research around that. Now, another tip. So when you're getting a lot of food that maybe is going to go off very soon, but has the potential of storing in the freezer, it's an awesome opportunity to do so if you have obviously space. So things like bananas and bread are often things, you know, if you want to eat the bread as in maybe toast it or put it with a soup or something, it's not too bad when you put it in the freezer. Obviously make sure the bread is vegan. So if you can store them, so bread, if it's not cut, then maybe you want to cut it up. And when you cut it up and you freeze it, then it's easy to kind of, you know, get it slice by slice. With the bananas, I would recommend taking them out of the peel and putting them in a container and breaking them up into pieces in a container, so that when you want to put those bananas in with a smoothie or some baking or something rather, it's just a whole lot easier. So yeah, I mean, those are just 2 foods, but you have a look around, there might be some other foods that you can have. They have a short lifespan, but they keep well in a freezer for a couple of months, because you know, if you can get a good deal on them and you know that you're going to eat them a lot, then I'd jump on that opportunity if you can. Another tip is going out less, of course, and maybe making a suggestion of, like, I understand that a lot of our socialising is based around food. It's become a really big part of almost any human around the world, and you know, maybe making a suggestion of having a potluck dinner or a potluck picnic, where you all get together and everyone brings a bit of food, and then you can share that together. And so there's, you know, places, there might be parks you could go to, or maybe you've got a nice house, or maybe someone you know has the space where you can all get together and you can share food together, and it's not going to break anyone's budget. And plus you get a way more wide variety of foods as well. I always love it when, you know, there's a couple of us bring the salads, and there's always a few that like to bring the snacks, and it's kind of like gets me sort of out of my bubble and getting, I guess, in regards that I get to explore a bit more of the vegan snacks that are out there too, which is really great. I do like to try those things every now and then as a way to, I guess, know what foods I could recommend for others that are not vegan, if they are wanting to buy food for someone that is vegan, or if they are wanting to try some more vegan foods too. Now, another one could be, here's an option, or here's a example of, so there was a fruit and veggie shop that I used to go to a lot, and during the black sapote, aka the chocolate pudding fruit season, I would often go in there and go up to the section of where that was, and one of the guys that worked there just knew that if he seen me in that section, he would come over to me and he would offer if he wanted me, if I would want him to go out the back and see if there were some super ripe and ready ones for me to buy. And yeah, so often I'd say yes please. He'd go out the back and there'd be another lot of them that were ripe and ready, and I might be able to get them at a good price as well. So, you know, if you feel comfortable, you could ask the people at the shop, especially if it's a smaller store, if they might have some produce that is not so visually appealing to the general consumer, that they might have a discount price or something like that, or maybe they want to give it away. It doesn't happen very often, especially with this food and safety laws that are in place in many places. But you know, that you never know. Sometimes you can get some good deals or get some cheap food that they would have otherwise chucked out. So yeah, do some planning, which can help. You know, having an idea of what it is that you might want to eat that week, or even for the next couple of days. I know for a lot of people, especially that work really long hours, that they often end up buying their lunches. For someone like me, I much prefer to make my lunches. I find it a lot more better on my budget, plus it's healthier, and I usually work in places that I have access to. I know it's not great, a microwave or some kind of cooking facility, which means I don't actually even have to really prepare much before I go to work. I can prepare it while I'm at work. But you know, for me, like I might, for the work week, I would cook up a whole lot of rice at the start of the week, and then on the Monday I would take that into work and keep that at work, and I'd do the same with the beans. And then I just need to make some vegetables up and put whatever sauce or condiments or nuts or seeds or whatever I wanted in there. And that was a really cheap and easy lunch for me. You know, I've worked in places sometimes for a short period of time where I've worked like 14 plus hours a day, and you know, I've had my breakfast, lunch and dinner all at work and not bought a single one of them. I just had prepared enough to make sure that I had continual food and snacks, of course. Sometimes when you're in a stressful environment like that, a few extra snacks can help, extra bits of fruit and whatnot. So yeah, things like, rice and beans sort of dishes. So you could have things like curries or burrito bowls. They're not usually too expensive to make. You put in whatever sort of vegetables and condiments that you like in there. Keeping the vegetables seasonal will help, as I said. I know it's not always good for packaging, but sometimes frozen vegetables can be really good for someone's budget. I often recommend that to a family member of mine, who she's quite, I would say, not quite as financially minded and able to budget very well with her food. So I often make suggestions of her just sort of buying vegetables. She's always like, I don't like cutting them, la da da da. So I always make suggestions. She buys them frozen, and at least she's got some vegetables in a day, which helps. And then things like smoothies that have got, I guess, a lot of bananas in them. Now there is a bit of food combining knowledge that you may need to know. Obviously, if you are drinking large smoothies, there's certain fruits that don't go well together, and that can sort of upset your digestion if you mix them in together in the same meal. So I wouldn't, perfect example of that was, I wouldn't eat a couple of bananas and then eat some watermelon. What you want to do is you want to reverse that kind of chronological order and have a little bit of space between digesting the two of them as well. And it's just basically on the fact that watermelon has a much higher water content and bananas have a much lower water content. And that's basically the basis around particular fruits, whether you should or shouldn't combine them together. But let me know if you want me to do a video of that down below. And then other dishes could be things like soups with lots of like vegetables and lentils, and maybe you could put a bit of grains in there, or leave the grains out and have bread. So I understand, like, some of these foods I'm suggesting are not always the healthiest, and they're not always plastic free, and they're not always organic, and they're not always local. We don't want to get to the point where we're becoming too strict on ourselves that it becomes too disabling to be able to even make a right decision. So you got to just assess where you're at with those things. Obviously, I encourage you to be able to buy food that doesn't have any packaging in it, that is local, that is like fresh and seasonal, and is whole foods, and a whole lot of other perfect things. It's organic, but it's not always attainable, and I understand that. So I want to try and meet people where they're at. Obviously make suggestions. Also not forget that those other, if you can do those other things as well and still remain within your cheap budget, then that's really, really good. Oh, just have a breather there. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you got at least more than one thing out of this. Please share it if you know anyone that may benefit from hearing about this. And yeah, I am well aware that the whole vegan food thing is really starting to take off in particular states around the world, which is wonderful, and it does feel like it's been a long time coming. So I'm very, very happy that we seem to be going somewhere with this. So anyway, leave your comments and your questions down below if you'd like, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.